Ma'am, if you can't follow basic instructions, maybe you shouldn't be flying. The words cracked across gate C-17 loud enough to turn heads all along the terminal. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. A man holding a paper coffee lowered it slowly. Even the little boy pressing his face against the window near the runway went still. Danielle Brooks stood beside the boarding scanner with one hand wrapped around the strap of her worn black duffel bag, exhaustion resting heavy beneath her eyes. The fluorescent airport lights washed pale across her dark skin and the silver strands beginning to appear near her temples. She looked like someone who had not slept in days because she hadn't. 19 straight hours inside a VA hospital room would do that to anybody. Her father's breathing machine still echoed faintly inside her ears, a cold mechanical rhythm she could not shake no matter how far she traveled from the hospital room in Baltimore. She had barely made it through security in time for the last flight to Chicago, and all she wanted now was a quiet seat near the window and 2 hours without another emergency. But Tyler Grant had already decided what kind of person she was the second she stepped into his line. He stood behind the gate counter in a crisp navy uniform with a TSA lanyard clipped sharply against his chest, posture rigid, jaw tight, eyes carrying the kind of confidence that came from years of people immediately obeying him. His scanner beeped once in Danielle's hand luggage. Nothing unusual, but instead of calmly asking her to step aside, he reached for the duffel bag himself. "Sir, I can open it for you," Danielle said quietly, her voice tired but polite. Tyler ignored her. "You people always say that after something gets flagged." The sentence landed hard. A woman near the boarding lane frowned instantly. An older man shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Danielle blinked once, almost like she was deciding whether she had enough energy left to respond at all. "Excuse me," she asked softly. Tyler stepped around the counter. "I said step aside." Before she could react, he yanked the bag from her shoulder. The strap burned across her coat sleeve as the heavy duffel slipped loose from her grip. Then came the sound. Thud. The bag hit the polished airport floor hard enough to echo beneath the high terminal ceiling. Several passengers gasped. Tyler crouched immediately and ripped the zipper open without waiting for permission. Danielle took a small step forward. "Please don't do that," she said, and for the first time there was something fragile beneath her calm. "There's medication in there." Tyler didn't stop. He turned the bag upside down in one rough motion. Everything spilled across the floor under the bright white lights. A pair of folded sweatpants, reading glasses, phone charger cables, hospital paperwork stamped with VA logos, a framed photograph sliding face down across the tile. Then a small insulin container rolled free, spinning in a slow circle near the boarding lane rope. Danielle's breath caught instantly. She moved toward it fast, dropping to one knee before it could slide beneath a nearby seat. Around her, people watched in stunned silence. Nobody reached for their phones now. Nobody whispered. The entire gate seemed suspended in one long, uncomfortable breath. Tyler straightened slowly, chest rising with irritation instead of embarrassment. "If there's nothing suspicious in here," he muttered coldly, "then you've got nothing to worry about." Danielle remained kneeling on the cold tile floor with the insulin container pressed tightly in her hand. For a moment, she didn't look angry. She just looked tired. Deeply, painfully tired. Then her eyes lifted toward Tyler, steady and unreadable beneath the harsh airport lighting. And that was the moment everything in the terminal began to change. The airport air felt colder after that. Danielle stayed kneeling for another second with the insulin container clutched carefully in both hands while the overhead speakers announced final boarding for a flight to Phoenix somewhere across the terminal. The voice sounded distant, almost underwater. Around her, travelers shifted awkwardly in their seats, pretending not to stare while staring anyway. Tyler crossed his arms near the boarding scanner, still convinced he had done nothing wrong. His jaw remained tight, but there was uncertainty creeping into his eyes now, faint and small like the first crack in glass before it spreads. Danielle placed the insulin container gently beside her folded sweater and continued gathering the rest of her belongings from the floor one item at a time. Calmly, deliberately. The photograph had landed near the leg of an empty chair. She reached for it slowly and brushed dust from the frame with the sleeve of her coat. The picture showed an older black man sitting beside a fishing dock beneath a pale Carolina sunrise, smiling with tired eyes and a weathered face. A hospital bracelet wrapped around his wrist. Tyler noticed the image but said nothing. Danielle slipped the photograph carefully back into her bag, as though it were something fragile enough to break from one wrong touch. The little boy near the runway window tugged quietly on his mother's sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, not quietly enough. "Why is that man being mean to her?" His mother immediately hushed him, embarrassment washing across her face, but the question lingered in the terminal heavier than any announcement overhead. Danielle finally stood again, slower this time. Fatigue rested visibly in her shoulders now. Up close, the dark circles beneath her eyes looked almost bruised by exhaustion. "My father is dying," she said softly, not to gain sympathy, not even angrily, but simply because she no longer had the strength to hide what the last few days had done to her. "I have been awake since yesterday morning. I am trying to make it home before they put him into hospice care." The words landed harder than shouting ever could have. A woman near the charging station lowered her phone. An older veteran wearing a faded Marine Corps cap stared toward Danielle's hospital paperwork still scattered near the gate rope. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, if your bag triggered additional screening, I am allowed to inspect it," he replied, though his voice sounded less certain than before. Danielle nodded once. "Inspecting it is one thing," she answered quietly. "Humiliating me in front of an entire terminal is another." Silence followed. Tyler glanced around and realized too late that people were no longer watching Danielle. They were watching him. The bright terminal lights reflected sharply against the polished floor between them, every scattered belonging suddenly feeling painfully visible beneath the attention of strangers. Danielle bent again to pick up a small bronze challenge coin that had rolled beneath the seat beside her. Tyler noticed the engraving as she lifted it into her palm. An eagle, a shield, government insignia worn smooth with age. His eyes narrowed slightly. Then another item caught his attention near the overturned duffel bag. A folded dark green jacket partially unrolled itself across the tile. Thick lettering stretched across the shoulder in faded gold thread. Federal Air Marshal Service. Tyler's expression changed instantly, though only slightly at first. He stared at the jacket as if his brain needed another second to process what he was seeing. Danielle saw his eyes move toward it. Slowly, she reached down and picked up the jacket too. She did not rush, did not explain, did not posture. She simply folded it carefully over her arm while the noise of the terminal seemed to dim once again around them. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled faintly beyond the runway glass as rain streaked across the night outside. And standing there beneath the harsh white airport lights, Tyler Grant suddenly realized he might have made the biggest mistake of his career. Tyler's throat tightened the moment he saw the lettering on the jacket. The confidence that had carried him through the last 10 minutes began slipping away piece by piece beneath the fluorescent lights. Danielle folded the jacket once more and placed it carefully inside the duffel bag beside the framed photograph and insulin case. Her movements remained steady, controlled, almost painfully calm. That calmness unsettled him more than anger would have. Most people yelled when embarrassed in public. Most people demanded managers or threatened lawsuits or pointed phones into faces. Danielle did none of that. She simply gathered her belongings with quiet dignity while the entire gate watched the scene unravel around them. Tyler cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he began. "Carefully. If you are law enforcement, you should have identified yourself earlier." Danielle paused for a second before looking up at him. Her eyes were dark with exhaustion, but there was something else in them now too. Disappointment. "I was not aware basic respect required credentials," she answered softly. The sentence landed harder than the first. A man seated near the charging station exhaled under his breath and looked away. Tyler felt heat creep into his neck. He opened his mouth again, but another voice cut across the terminal first. "What is going on over here?" The sharp heels of Airport Operations Director Angela Morris echoed against the tile floor as she approached the gate with quick, controlled steps. Her silver airport badge swung against a charcoal blazer, and two supervisors hurried behind her carrying tablets. Angela had the kind of presence that naturally quieted a room. Even before she reached them, Tyler straightened instinctively. "Ms. Morris," he said quickly, "this passenger's bag triggered additional screening," and Angela stopped walking the moment her eyes landed on Danielle. The change in her expression was immediate. Not dramatic. Worse. Recognition. Her posture shifted almost imperceptibly, tension tightening across her face as though she had just walked into the middle of something dangerous. Danielle gave a tired nod. "Evening, Angela." Tyler blinked. The operations director looked from Danielle to the scattered belongings still on the floor. Then her eyes settled on the dark green jacket folded halfway inside the bag. The color drained from Tyler's face before Angela even spoke. "Tell me," Angela said very slowly, "why Senior Instructor Brooks is standing in the middle of my terminal with her belongings all over the floor." Silence swallowed the gate completely. Tyler felt every pair of eyes in the terminal lock onto him at once. "Senior Instructor?" One passenger whispered nearby. Danielle closed her eyes briefly, almost like she no longer had the energy for any of this. Angela stepped closer. "Danielle Brooks has trained federal response teams at 6 major airports in the last 4 years, she said coldly. "Including this one." Tyler stared at Danielle as though seeing her for the first time. The worn coat, the tired face, the hospital paperwork. None of it matched the picture he had built in his head when she first stepped into his boarding lane. And suddenly that realization hit him harder than panic. He had not treated her poorly because of anything she had done. He had treated her poorly because he assumed he already knew who she was. Danielle finally zipped the duffel bag shut. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. "I did not ask for special treatment," she said quietly. "I just wanted to board my flight." Tyler swallowed hard. "I did not know who you were," he muttered weakly. Danielle looked at him for a long moment beneath the cold airport lights while rain streaked slowly down the giant terminal windows behind them. Then she answered in a voice barely above a whisper. "That is exactly the problem." The boarding area remained frozen long after Danielle's words faded into silence. Tyler stood near the scanner with his hands stiff at his sides, suddenly unsure what to do with them. The bright overhead lights no longer felt routine or harmless. They exposed everything now. The scattered hospital papers still resting near the boarding rope. The passengers staring openly. The shame spreading slowly across his face. Angela Morris bent down and picked up one of the folders that had slipped halfway beneath a seat. Her eyes moved across the paperwork briefly before she handed it back to Danielle with careful respect. "Your father is at St. Mary's VA?" she asked quietly. Danielle nodded once while sliding the papers back into her bag. "Late-stage pulmonary fibrosis," she answered softly. "The doctor said I should get home tonight." Something tightened in Angela's expression. She glanced toward Tyler, disappointment sharp behind her eyes. And instead of helping her board quickly, she said coldly, "You turned Gate C-17 into a public spectacle." Tyler swallowed hard. "I thought I was following protocol." Angela's voice dropped lower. "Protocol does not give you permission to strip someone of dignity." The sentence hung in the air heavier than before. Danielle adjusted the strap of the duffel bag onto her shoulder again, though the movement looked harder now. Fatigue was catching up with her quickly. Her hands trembled faintly from exhaustion and stress, but she kept her posture steady. The little boy near the runway window continued watching her quietly, his small sneakers dangling from the edge of the chair. His mother leaned closer and whispered something into his ear. He nodded slowly without taking his eyes off Danielle. Tyler noticed it all. Every stare, every silence, every passenger now looking at him with the same discomfort Danielle must have felt minutes earlier. Somewhere beyond the giant windows, lightning flickered softly inside thick storm clouds hanging over the runway. Rain tapped against the glass in uneven waves while boarding announcements echoed overhead. Flight 482 to Chicago now entering final boarding. Danielle exhaled slowly at the sound. Relief flickered across her tired face for only a second before another sharp cough escaped her chest. She turned slightly away, pressing 2 fingers briefly against her lips as though trying to hide how drained she really was. Angela immediately stepped forward. "I can arrange a cart to take you directly to the aircraft," she offered gently. Danielle shook her head. "I appreciate it, but I can walk." Tyler finally found his voice again. "Ms. Brooks," he began carefully, "I really am sorry." Danielle looked at him quietly. The airport noise seemed distant again beneath the steady hum of fluorescent lights above them. "Do you know what the hardest part is?" she asked softly. Tyler said nothing. Danielle continued. "It is not the embarrassment. It is not even the assumption. It is realizing how easy it was for you to stop seeing me as a person the moment you felt authority in your hands." Tyler's eyes dropped toward the floor. Angela folded her arms tightly beside him. Danielle adjusted her grip on the duffel bag once more and started toward the boarding lane. Then she stopped after only 2 steps. Something small had fallen near the scanner unnoticed during the chaos. Tyler bent instinctively and picked it up before she could. It was an old laminated photograph, folded nearly white at the corners from years of being carried around. Tyler stared at it for a second. A younger Danielle stood smiling in military fatigues beside 3 airport officers inside a training hangar. One of them was Tyler's father. His breath caught instantly. Officer Daniel Grant, retired federal air marshal. Tyler's fingers tightened around the photograph as realization spread across his face like ice water. Danielle turned slowly and saw the picture in his hand. For the first time that night, genuine sadness crossed her eyes. "Your father trained under me," she said quietly. "He was one of the good ones." The photograph trembled slightly between Tyler's fingers. Not because of the air conditioning inside the terminal, because his hand had started shaking. The younger version of his father smiled proudly from the faded picture beside Danielle, both of them standing beneath the wing of a training aircraft almost 20 years earlier. Tyler recognized the look on his father's face instantly. Respect. Real respect. The kind his father rarely gave anyone lightly. Danielle stepped closer and gently took the photograph back from his hand before the edges could bend further. "Your father could read a room faster than anyone I ever trained," she said quietly. He noticed people others ignored. Tyler stared at her speechless. His father had spoken about the Air Marshal Service constantly when Tyler was growing up. Long nights at the kitchen table. Stories about airports. Stories about judgment. About pressure. About learning to stay calm when everybody else panicked. But there was one lesson his father repeated more than any other. Respect first. Always. Tyler remembered hearing those words as a kid while eating cereal before school, never realizing how deeply they would return to haunt him one day. Angela Morris looked between them silently, understanding something painful was unfolding beneath the fluorescent lights of Gate C-17. Danielle slid the photograph carefully into a side pocket of the duffel bag and adjusted the zipper. Her exhaustion seemed heavier now, almost visible in the way her shoulders sagged beneath her coat. "Your father checked on my family after my husband died," she said softly. "Every Christmas for 3 years." Tyler's face drained again. "I did not know that," he whispered. Danielle nodded faintly. "Most people do not know the quiet things good men do." The sentence hit harder than anger ever could have. Tyler looked down at the polished tile floor, unable to meet her eyes anymore. Around them, passengers remained unusually silent. No one seemed eager to board now, even though the final boarding announcement echoed overhead again. The storm outside had intensified. Rain streaked harder against the giant windows while blue runway lights blurred through the water like distant stars. Somewhere nearby, a coffee machine hissed softly inside an empty kiosk. Tiny ordinary sounds filling the silence no one wanted to interrupt. Then another voice broke through. "Dad." Tyler turned sharply. A little girl wearing a yellow hoodie stood near the edge of the seating area, clutching a stuffed rabbit against her chest. Sophie Grant, 8 years old. Tyler's daughter had been sitting with a coworker near the employee waiting area during his shift. Her wide eyes moved uncertainly between her father and Danielle. "Daddy," she asked quietly, "why is everybody staring?" Tyler opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Sophie took a few small steps closer. She looked toward Danielle's bag lying partly open beside the boarding lane and noticed the insulin case resting near the top. Then she looked back at Danielle's tired face. "Is she sick?" she whispered. Danielle offered the child a faint, gentle smile despite everything. "Just tired, sweetheart." Sophie looked back up at her father again. "Did you help her?" The question landed like a knife wrapped in innocence. Tyler's throat tightened visibly. He could not answer, because for the first time all night, there was no policy left to hide behind. No scanner, no protocol, no authority. Only the truth sitting bare in front of strangers and his own daughter. Sophie frowned slightly, confused by the silence. Then she did something small that changed the entire feeling of the terminal. She walked over to Danielle and held out the stuffed rabbit with both hands. "You can hold Mr. Pickles on the plane if you want," she said softly. Danielle blinked in surprise. Her eyes glistened suddenly beneath the harsh white lights. Not dramatic tears, just exhaustion finally meeting unexpected kindness. She gently touched the rabbit's ear and smiled. "Thank you," she whispered. Behind them, Tyler lowered his head completely. and standing there beneath the cold airport lights while rain hammered against the runway glass, he realized his daughter had shown more humanity in 5 seconds than he had all night. For a while, nobody moved. The storm outside rolled heavier across the runway, low thunder vibrating faintly through the glass walls of the terminal, while blue taxiway lights shimmered against the rain-soaked pavement beyond the windows. Danielle stood quietly near the boarding lane with Sophie's stuffed rabbit resting lightly in her hand. The tiny toy looked strangely small against her weathered fingers that had spent decades gripping training manuals, emergency harnesses, hospital railings, and now a duffel bag filled with medicine and memories. Sophie smiled shyly at her before stepping back toward her father's side. Tyler still could not raise his eyes fully. The humiliation sitting on his shoulders now was not loud or dramatic. It was quieter than that. Heavier. The kind that settles slowly into a person once excuses stop working. Angela Morris checked the time on her watch and spoke softly into her radio, arranging a temporary hold on the boarding bridge. No one complained. Not a single passenger protested the delay. Most of them remained seated in silence, watching Danielle with an entirely different understanding now. The older Marine veteran near the charging station slowly removed his cap as she passed him. Danielle noticed the gesture and nodded respectfully in return. Nothing more. No speech. No performance. Just quiet recognition between two tired people who understood service in different ways. The overhead lights hummed softly above them. A janitor pushed a mop bucket through the far end of the terminal, wheels squeaking faintly against the tile floor. Somewhere nearby, fresh coffee beans were being ground inside a closed cafe preparing for the overnight shift. Small, ordinary sounds filling the stillness while Danielle finally lowered herself carefully into one of the empty airport seats near the gate window. The exhaustion in her body had reached its limit. She leaned back slowly and closed her eyes for only a second. Rainwater crawled down the giant glass panes beside her in crooked silver trails, reflecting against her tired face. Tyler watched from several feet away, hands clenched tightly near his sides. He remembered his father sitting at their kitchen table years ago after late shifts at the airport. Daniel Grant used to say that the uniform was dangerous if a person forgot what it was actually for. Authority is not permission to lose your humanity, his father once told him while polishing an old badge under the yellow kitchen light. Tyler had nodded back then without really listening. Now those words echoed painfully inside his head. Sophie tugged gently on his sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, "she looks really tired." Tyler swallowed hard and nodded faintly. "Yeah," he answered quietly. "She does." Sophie looked toward Danielle again. Grandpa would have helped her. The sentence broke whatever was left standing inside him. Tyler pressed one hand briefly against his mouth and looked away toward the storm outside. Angela noticed the movement, but said nothing. Danielle opened her eyes slowly after a moment and glanced down at the stuffed rabbit still resting in her lap. Her expression softened faintly despite everything. "Mr. Pickles has seen some rough flights, huh?" she asked gently toward Sophie. The little girl smiled. "He gets scared during turbulence." Danielle nodded once. "Most people do." For the first time that night, a few soft laughs spread quietly through the gate area. Not mocking. Human. Warm. The tension that had gripped the terminal for the last half hour loosened slightly beneath the steady rain outside. Danielle handed the rabbit carefully back to Sophie, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded handkerchief. Tyler recognized it instantly from the old photograph. His father used to carry the exact same kind during long shifts. Danielle noticed him staring. "Your father gave me this after my first air marshal deployment," she said softly. "I kept it all these years." Tyler's eyes reddened instantly. Danielle folded the handkerchief carefully in her palm and looked out toward the runway lights shimmering through the storm. "Good people leave traces behind," she whispered. And beneath the cold fluorescent lights of Gate C-17, nobody spoke for a very long time. The silence at Gate C-17 finally broke when Angela Morris's radio crackled sharply against her blazer. "Operations to Director Morris. Immediate update requested regarding delayed boarding." Angela pressed the button calmly, but kept her eyes on Danielle. "Boarding delay is authorized," she answered. "I will handle the report personally." Tyler looked up slightly at that. Personally. The word carried weight inside an airport. It meant paperwork, investigations, statements. Cameras reviewed frame by frame beneath fluorescent office lights. It meant this moment was no longer something he could quietly walk away from once the shift ended. Danielle seemed to understand that too. She stood slowly from the airport seat, lifting the duffel bag back onto her shoulder with visible effort. The storm outside had begun easing slightly now, rain softening against the windows while distant runway lights glowed through the darkness like scattered stars. The boarding bridge door stood open nearby, spilling pale blue light across the carpeted jetway entrance. "You should board before they close the aircraft door," Angela said gently. Danielle nodded once. "Thank you." She took 2 slow steps toward the gate scanner before stopping again as another voice approached from farther down the terminal. Danielle Brooks. A gray-haired man in a Navy operations jacket hurried toward the gate carrying a tablet under one arm. His eyes widened instantly when he recognized her. "My God," he said breathlessly. "I heard there was an issue at C-17, but nobody told me it was you." Danielle gave a faint, tired smile. "Evening, Harold." Tyler watched the exchange carefully, confusion deepening across his face. Harold Jenkins was regional security director for the entire airport system. Tyler had seen him maybe twice in 3 years. Staff members practically straightened their backs when Harold entered a room. And now the man looked genuinely shaken, standing in front of Danielle Brooks. Harold turned toward Angela immediately. "Do not tell me she was treated disrespectfully here." Angela's silence answered for her. Harold closed his eyes briefly, jaw tightening beneath the bright gate lights. Then he looked directly at Tyler. "Do you have any idea who trained the post-September 11th airport behavior assessment standards your department still uses today?" Tyler felt his stomach drop. Harold pointed quietly toward Danielle. "Her." A few nearby passengers gasped softly under their breath. Tyler stared at Danielle in complete disbelief now. Harold continued, voice lower this time. "Half the anti-profiling reforms in this airport came from her field reports after she nearly died undercover 20 years ago because officers ignored actual threats while targeting innocent travelers." Danielle's expression shifted immediately. "Harold," she warned softly. But he shook his head. "No. He needs to hear this." The terminal seemed impossibly still around them. Even the rolling luggage wheels from distant gates sounded muted now. Tyler's face had gone pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. The humiliation he felt earlier transformed into something deeper. Horror. Realization. He had publicly humiliated the very woman whose work existed to stop exactly this kind of treatment from happening. Danielle looked exhausted by the attention now. "I did not stay in this job for recognition," she said quietly. "I stayed because people deserve to travel without fear." Harold nodded slowly. "And yet you still get treated like a threat." Nobody answered him. Tyler opened his mouth twice before words finally came out. "I do not know how to fix this." Danielle looked at him for a long moment. Rainwater continued sliding down the giant windows behind her while boarding lights blinked softly against the wet runway outside. "You cannot undo humiliation," she said gently. "But you can decide who you become after it." The sentence settled over the terminal like a final verdict. Then Danielle stepped toward the scanner once more. Tyler instinctively reached for the boarding device with trembling hands. But this time his movements were careful, respectful, quiet. He scanned her ticket without another word. The soft electronic beep echoed through the gate. And for the first time all night, Tyler Grant understood the true weight of the uniform hanging on his shoulders. Danielle stepped onto the jet bridge slowly, the soft wheels of her duffel bag rattling faintly behind her against the narrow metal floor. The cold airport air faded with every step toward the aircraft door, replaced by the warmer hum of cabin ventilation and dim overhead lighting spilling from inside the plane. Behind her, Gate C-17 remained strangely silent even after boarding resumed. Passengers moved more carefully now, voices lower, eyes lingering toward the woman walking ahead of them with tired shoulders and quiet dignity. Tyler stayed near the scanner long after her boarding pass had disappeared from the screen. His hands rested motionless against the counter while the electronic boarding beep echoed again and again for other passengers. But he barely heard any of it. Sophie stood beside him, holding Mr. Pickles tightly against her chest. "Daddy," she whispered softly. Tyler blinked and looked down at her. "Yeah." Sophie tilted her head slightly. "Are you sad?" The question hit him with painful simplicity. Tyler looked toward the jet bridge entrance where Danielle had vanished moments earlier. Yeah, he answered honestly. I think I am. Sophie slipped her small hand into his. Grandpa said when people are hurting, you are supposed to help first. Tyler closed his eyes briefly at the words. His father's voice seemed everywhere tonight. In the terminal lights. In the rain against the windows. In the shame pressing heavy against his chest. Angela Morris stood nearby reviewing incident notes on a tablet, while Harold Jenkins spoke quietly with another supervisor. Neither interrupted him. Some moments did not need management. They needed reflection. Tyler suddenly reached for something beneath the gate counter and stepped away quickly before he could lose the courage to do it. Hold boarding for 30 seconds, he called softly toward Angela. Then he disappeared down the jet bridge, carrying a small paper bag from the closed cafe kiosk near the terminal wall. Danielle had just reached her row when she heard footsteps approaching behind her. She turned slightly in the narrow aisle, surprised to see Tyler standing there beneath the dim cabin lights, breathing harder than before from rushing. A few seated passengers looked up curiously. Tyler stopped several feet away, careful not to invade her space again. The shame on his face was no longer defensive now, just honest. Ms. Brooks, he said quietly. Danielle looked at him without speaking. Tyler held out the paper bag with both hands. You dropped this during screening. Danielle frowned slightly before opening the bag. Inside sat the small insulin container she thought she had already packed away, along with a sealed bottle of water and a turkey sandwich from the airport cafe. Warm still. Freshly made. Danielle looked up slowly. Tyler swallowed hard. My father used to say nobody thinks clearly when they are hungry or hurting, he said softly. I should have remembered that earlier. Danielle stared at the sandwich for a moment longer than expected. The simple kindness seemed to catch her off guard more than the humiliation had. Tyler continued carefully. I know an apology does not erase what happened tonight, but I am sorry. Truly. The cabin remained quiet around them. Flight attendants paused discreetly near the galley, pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. Danielle finally nodded once. Thank you for bringing the medication, she answered gently. Tyler lowered his eyes. And the sandwich. Danielle's tired expression softened faintly for the first time all night. That too. Tyler let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for an hour. Danielle carefully placed the insulin and sandwich inside her bag before looking back at him again. Your father was right about one thing, she said softly. Tyler looked up. What is that? Danielle glanced towards Sophie, waiting nervously at the end of the jet bridge. People remember how you make them feel long after they forget what you said. Tyler turned toward his daughter, standing beneath the pale terminal lights. His eyes reddened slightly again. Danielle settled carefully into her seat beside the rain-streaked window, while Tyler stepped backward into the aisle. Then before leaving, he placed one hand gently against the top of the seat beside her. I will do better, he whispered. Danielle studied him quietly for a long moment beneath the soft cabin lights. Then she gave one small nod. And somehow, that felt heavier than forgiveness. The aircraft door closed with a soft mechanical thud that barely rose above the steady patter of rain against the fuselage outside. Cabin lights dimmed gradually into the warm amber glow used for late-night departures, casting long reflections across the windows and tray tables while passengers settled quietly into their seats. Danielle rested her head carefully against the seat back near the window, the untouched sandwich beside her and the insulin case secured safely inside her bag beneath the seat. Beyond the rain-streaked glass, airport lights shimmered across the soaked tarmac in blurred lines of blue and gold. The storm was finally moving east. A flight attendant stopped briefly beside Danielle's row. Can I bring you anything before takeoff, ma'am? Danielle looked up slowly, exhaustion still heavy behind her eyes. Just water, please. The attendant smiled gently. Of course. Danielle thanked her softly and looked back out toward the runway. Down below, tiny figures moved beneath reflective rain jackets near the loading crews and service carts. The entire airport suddenly felt quieter than before, as though the night itself had exhaled. Near gate C-17, Tyler Grant remained standing alone beside the scanner long after boarding had finished. Most of the terminal lights had dimmed for overnight operations now, leaving only soft pools of white light stretching across the polished floor. Sophie sat curled beside the window holding Mr. Pickles against her chest, while Angela Morris finalized reports nearby. Tyler loosened his tie slowly for the first time all shift. His reflection stared back at him from the Darkened terminal glass. Tired eyes. Wrinkled uniform. A man confronting himself in silence. Sophie looked up at him carefully. "Daddy." Tyler turned. "Yes, sweetheart." She pointed toward the airplane outside the window where runway lights reflected off the wet wings. "Do you think she will make it to her dad in time?" Tyler swallowed hard before answering. "I hope so." Sophie nodded quietly, satisfied with the honesty more than the answer itself. Tyler crouched beside her chair and wrapped an arm gently around her shoulders. Outside, the aircraft slowly pushed back from the gate. Danielle watched the terminal drift farther away through the rain-smeared glass while the engines hummed softly beneath the cabin floor. Her fingers brushed the old handkerchief folded inside her coat pocket. Daniel Grant's handkerchief, still worn soft from years of carrying it through airports and long shifts and ordinary acts of kindness nobody ever saw. Danielle closed her eyes briefly as memories moved quietly through her mind. Training hangars. Her husband laughing in a kitchen filled with Sunday music. Her father teaching her how to bait a fishing hook beneath a Carolina sunrise. The way good people leave traces behind even after they are gone. The plane paused near the runway threshold while lightning flickered faintly in distant clouds now far beyond the airport perimeter. Then came the slow, powerful roar of acceleration. The cabin vibrated gently. Seat backs pressed softly against tired shoulders. And the city lights began slipping away beneath them. Back inside the terminal, Tyler watched the aircraft lift into the dark, rainy sky until it disappeared completely beyond the clouds. He remained there for several seconds after it vanished. Not speaking, not moving, just standing beneath the cold fluorescent lights while everything Danielle said replayed quietly inside his mind. Authority means nothing if you forget dignity. Finally, Sophie slipped her small hand into his again. Tyler looked down at her and managed the faintest smile. Then together they walked slowly through the nearly empty terminal beneath rows of fading midnight lights. No applause followed them. No dramatic music. Just the distant sound of rolling luggage wheels, rain tapping softly against glass, and somewhere far above the storm clouds, a tired woman finally heading home.